Hello everybody, how are you? David Franco here from DeFrancoGaming.com with my review, as promised, of the Gioteck SC-1 wireless sports gaming controller for the PlayStation 3. Now, before I get into this review, I do want to point something out real quick. This is a blister because I burned myself eating a pizza roll last night because I couldn't take a break from The Last of Us multiplayer. So I figured, why not eat and game at the same time? Let's just say the universe won against me, and it hurt like a mother. Seriously, this was just the most painful burn I've ever felt from food. I mean, it was that bad. I just wanted to throw that out there because I know I'm going to get people asking, David, what happened to your lip? Well, that's what. Gamer problems. Okay, so getting to the review of the SC-1 wireless controller. Now, I should say right off the bat, this is advertised as a sports gaming controller, but there's no reason... There goes Maui the cat. There's no reason why you cannot use this for games like The Last of Us, God of War, Little Big Planet. This is a normal gaming controller, but I'll explain why this is advertised as a sports controller in a bit. Jumping into the review, let's talk about design. Design is obviously a very important aspect of a controller. Is it comfortable? Does it actually feel good? Does it respond as it should? And all that good stuff. Okay, so I do have my notes right under the camera. You're going to see me reference down because I have a lot of notes because I love gaming, I love controllers, so I wanted to make sure I didn't really miss out on any of the small details. The first thing I got to mention is, yes, this does indeed look just like the Xbox 360 controller because of the offset analog sticks. Now, this is definitely a personal preference. Some people prefer the aligned analog sticks like on the DualShock 3 or the 6-axis, but then other people like me prefer the Xbox 360 controller design where the analog sticks are offset like so. And guys, I gotta say, this alone is a huge, huge, huge selling point for me. I mean, I cannot stress this enough. I love the Xbox 360 controller. Actually, I'll go on the record right now and say it's probably my favorite controller of all time. It's that good. Next up are the bumpers and the shoulder buttons. Again, just like the 360 controller, L1 and R1 are in the form of bumpers, while L2 and R2 are more like triggers. And honestly, that's something I've always disliked about the 6-axis controller, is that the buttons are kind of convex rather concave. I never understood why Sony went with that design decision. It honestly baffles me, but I'm glad that Gioteck has come through with that little attention to detail. Now, yes, guys, I did say 6-axis because, unfortunately, I never got around to buying myself a DualShock 3 controller because, honestly, I don't play my PS3 often enough to warrant the purchase of that, but I'm really glad this thing came into my life. So, in other words, the DualShock 3 could be better than the 6-axis in several ways, but for this video, I'm going to compare this controller to the 6-axis. And finally, in terms of the design department, let's talk about how it looks and feels. Guys, I gotta say, this thing looks hot. It has a red and black theme going on, and it has a matte finish. In other words, it has an excellent, excellent grip. Alright, so instead of obsessing over the design, let's just jump into pros and cons. That's usually how I like to break my reviews down. So, let's do it. Pro number one, I already made this clear, but it's still in my notes. This is a very comfortable fit. I never really found my hands, feeling strained or anything like that. The second pro, the analog sticks feel perfect. I mean, they actually feel great. L3 and R3 clicking in does not feel cheap at all, and that is a big deal. I have used third-party controllers in the past, and for whatever reason, I don't know if this is like a universal thing, I'm not sure why, but Gioteck went the extra step further and actually made L3 and R3 click fine. Because I have used controllers in the past where if you click, they make a very loud noise, and it just feels like downright cheap plastic. I don't really understand it. But still, guys, with this controller, it's a completely different story. This feels just like the 360 controller, and even the 6-axis in terms of L3 and R3. The third pro is all about response time, and well, that's the fact that it's great. I never had any delay issues. I never had any issues with feeling like there was lag or anything like that. Pro number 4 is a very interesting one, and this is definitely unique to this controller and many other controllers out there, but it's not a normal feature you'd expect out of Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo, and that is the turbo function. Now, when I say turbo, it's exactly what it means. It's simulating the fact that I'm pressing buttons very quickly like this. An excellent example of this is The Last of Us. I just beat it a week or two ago. I loved every minute of it. Amazing game overall. However, there were many times where you had to press square many times to defeat an enemy or open a garage or anything like that. But with this controller, if I hold down the square button, actually, if I hold down turbo first, right there, right? Yeah, hold down turbo, then press square, you'll see it blink. Now, it's obviously not on right now because I'm not playing a game. Okay, so if I hold down the square button now that it's programmed, the game will actually think I'm rapidly pressing it like this, when in reality, I'm simply holding it. And guys, honestly, it actually came in use. It was actually a pretty cool feature. Okay, so how does this factor into sports games? Well, I gotta say, I don't play many sports games, but I have played several NFL 2K games, and I've played several Madden games here and there. And I know when you're trying to run with the ball, you have to press X over and over again. But now if you program it with the turbo function, you simply have to hold down X, and the game thinks you're repeatedly pressing it, well, like a mother. So yes, guys, the turbo function alone is kind of a big deal if you play games a lot that require rapidly pressing a button, especially in a fighting game. The next pro I want to talk about is a very simple one, and well, that's Rumble. Rumble feels great, but I gotta say that kind of is a big deal to me because being a 6-axis user, I have yet to feel Rumble on any of the PS3 games until this thing came into my life, obviously. The SC-1 has great Rumble functionality. Now, I can't compare it to the DualShock 3 because, again, I have not used that controller myself, but in theory, they should feel about the same. The next pro is a very, very important one for gaming, and that is battery life. Now, you obviously don't want to be playing a game, especially online, and your controller suddenly dies. That would not be good. But with the SC-1, I'm not sure the exact battery time, but I've only had to charge it once or twice, and I've been using this thing for at least a couple weeks. And finally, the last pro I want to talk about is something I didn't really use that much, but it can come in use if you're into this sort of thing, and that is right here. You have function 1 and function 2. These are kind of like macro/combo buttons. So I believe in theory you hold down function and you press your combo like square, triangle, triangle, X, square. You release, and then if you press that function button, it'll do square, triangle, triangle, X, square, as if you're pressing them yourself. But in reality, it's a macro. Okay, so this feature maybe wasn't used by me, but maybe you'll use it. I mean, I don't play that many fighting games nowadays, but for example, if I was really into Mortal Kombat right now, I haven't played a Mortal Kombat game in months, but I'm sure I will again soon at some point. I'm sure you could program a fatality and then simply press F1 or F2 to actually do that fatality rather than pressing all the buttons yourself. So if you think about it, it's a pretty cool feature if you use it in the right scenario. Alright, so those are my list of pros, guys. However, I gotta be perfectly honest with you. As amazing as this controller is, it has, I think, 6 or 7 cons. So let's get started. Con number 1 is the fact that you have to use this, a USB dongle. This does not use Bluetooth, and I'm not sure why. Maybe your Gioteck wants you to be able to use this on your computer, but either way, why not have Bluetooth support? Why? I mean, guys, this doesn't make the controller a bad product, just like that. It just kind of made me wonder, why isn't it Bluetooth? Not a huge deal, not a huge deal at all, actually. It's just something that I felt was worth mentioning. Okay, so this next con could be a deal breaker for some people, and that's the fact that you get this included. A very, very short USB cable. Now, I should say, this is just mini USB, so you could just buy a cheap mini USB that's, 20 feet long and still play while charging. But with something this long, I'm not going to be standing in front of my TV charging my controller and trying to play The Last of Us can't even say it. The Last of Us at the same time. That's just not ideal. But still, for me, it wasn't a big deal because the battery life was really good. And if I play The Last of Us for like 4 or 5 hours straight like I did last night, I'm getting so much better at that game, then I would play, then charge my controller overnight while I sleep. It's just one of those things that you have to plan around. Alright, so getting back into the actual design portion of the controller and usability, con number 3, guys, the square button, in my opinion and my personal usage, is a little too close to the right analog stick. Now, this never really got in the way of gameplay. I never found myself accidentally pressing the right analog stick as in, in terms of R3 or anything like that, and it messed up my game. But I still found it kind of annoying when I went to hit the square button, my thumb would be touching the right analog stick. Maybe I'm too critical. I don't know. But it's just something I found mildly annoying. Alright, so getting into con number 4, this is kind of a huge deal for people who are really into fighting games or people who heavily rely on this function of the controller, and that is the D-pad. Now, in my opinion and my overall usage, the D-pad, as you can probably see right here, feels kind of loose and cheap. Okay, so I'm not going to say the Xbox 360's D-pad is any better, because it's certainly not. Actually, in fact, they feel pretty similar, but it's definitely not as good as a 6-axis / the DualShock 3. Now, for me, it's not a big deal because I don't use the D-pad religiously. I mean, I don't play many fighters on my PS3. I'm more of a 360 person when it comes to fighters. But if you are really someone who uses the D-pad often, this is definitely something you want to keep in mind. This next con could be a deal breaker, especially if you play a game that requires it, and that's the fact that the SC-1 does not support 6-axis no matter what. I mean, 6-axis support, it's not there. It's 0. I don't know why. Maybe it's a licensing issue with Sony, but Gioteck, it's not in the controller. Now, this might not be a big deal to all people because, let's be honest, only a few games out there really rely on the 6-axis functionality. But still, when I was playing The Last of Us and my flashlight battery would begin to go, the game asks you to hit the controller as if you're hitting a flashlight in real life, which honestly kind of fascinated me. I thought that was really cool. But unfortunately, I couldn't do it, so I had to shut my flashlight off for like 10 minutes, waiting for the battery to regenerate or however long it takes in that game, and then I'd be good to go. But still, I actually did find it very annoying that I couldn't even fix my flashlight simply because the controller didn't support 6-axis. Alright, so is that Naughty Dog's fault for forcing that on gamers, or is it Gioteck's fault for overlooking that? And by overlooking, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Again, it could be a licensing issue, but regardless, it definitely was annoying. Especially true if a game requires it to progress in the game. For instance, if you go on Amazon, I think one of the Killzone games requires you to use 6-axis to actually finish the game. And that, quite honestly, is pretty annoying. Alright, moving on in the list of cons, this next one is all about the power button, which is right here. You press it, you can see it blinking, works fine. However, the power button does not work with the PlayStation 3 when turning it on. Now, this is not a huge deal for many people, but it definitely is a minor annoyance for me. I mean, especially nowadays, we're kind of spoiled with that functionality. Whether you use the Xbox 360, the Wii U, or the 6-axis / DualShock 3, we do have that functionality and option of turning on our console from the comfort of our couch, our bed, wherever you're sitting. However, with this controller, you cannot. I was forced to go up to my PS3, tap the power button, then sit back down on my couch. Now, is that a sign of laziness? Obviously. Is it a huge deal / deal breaker? Definitely not. And finally, my last con of all, again, still talking about the power button. Pressing this button usually brings up the cross media bar, right? Yes. And then from that screen, you have the option of turning off the console, turning off your controller, as well as many other options, including seeing your battery life. However, with this controller, unfortunately, you cannot. Now, this honestly did kind of annoy me here and there because I wanted to see how good my battery life was and whether I could have a few more matches on The Last of Us, but it just wasn't possible. However, guys, I should say not all hope is lost. When your battery life is low, instead of displaying on screen, the light down here will flash. So it's not a total deal breaker, but it's definitely something I wanted to share with you guys. And well, that's it. That is my list of pros and cons. I know it's a lot to talk about. This video is definitely longer than 10 minutes, but you know what? That's okay. I love gaming, and I wanted to tell you guys as much as I possibly could. Alright guys, so what is the verdict? Is the SC-1 wireless sports controller worth it? Without a doubt in my mind, yes. Now for me personally, I should say, I mean, if a couple of those cons are a deal breaker for you, then I completely understand. But for me and my personal gaming usage, I really love this controller. Despite its many cons that I listed, the pros easily outweigh them. I mean, this is the pros, these are the cons. Although, I think it's more like this. Pros are heavier, cons are lighter. Is that how that works? Either way, you get what I'm saying. Also, guys, I gotta say, this is now my preferred PS3 controller, and that's saying a lot. I mean, I don't really see myself using the 6-axis ever again, unless the game requires it, but fortunately, that's not often the case. So Gioteck, shout out to you guys for making a kick-ass controller. I really appreciate it. And of course, I do appreciate you sending this my way for review purposes. And also, guys, you can get this for just $50 or less than, probably about $40 if you search in the right places. including gear pop. And now, guys, I'm finally done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. And don't forget, if you do have any questions regarding the SC-1, just post them below, and I'll do my best to help you out. Real quick, guys, I do want to mention my PlayStation Network ID is the creative one, same as on YouTube, because I've seen people ask on Twitter and Facebook and all that good stuff. So if you want to play with me in The Last of Us, add me. Alright, guys, I'm finally out. Thanks again. I'll see you in my next video. Peace.